BYD sold 641,000 plug-in electric vehicles in the first half of 2022. Does that make them the new king over Tesla? And also, Sandy Munro and company finally got hold of a 4680-based structural battery pack Model Y from Giga Texas. What have they discovered so far? Let's take a look. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So let's start with the BYD results from the first half of 2022. It sounds like BYD is now the ruler of plug-in electric vehicles, but it's not quite such a simple case, and that's why I have this graph. This is a special thanks to Holmar's Catalog for going out and finding this, and of course to Snowball Capital for actually producing this graph. Now these are, you can see how this is just a table with numbers that are over here, and they're really far away from the ones on the right, which is the year of 2022. So I've had to just basically do the best I can with guesstimating all this stuff. So do not assume that these numbers are completely correct. But basically the trick of all of this stuff is that BYD has started, as far as I can tell, mostly in 2022. They don't break out their plug-in hybrid vehicles from their fully battery electric vehicles. So they delivered 641,000 plug-in vehicles in the first half of 2022. But as you can see from this graph, it's broken up into battery electric vehicles, which are in green, and then plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which are like, the Toyota Prius is the earliest one of these things. But basically you plug it in, but it's got a gas engine and a very small battery. So you can see that that's in blue, and then they have some commercial stuff, bus things like that. That doesn't really matter. What we really care about here is the first half of 2022. And so this stuff right here, those are the ones we want. And so basically what I did was I just ran this from over here to over here and did my best guess at what these numbers actually are. And you're free to, look at this and see if you come up with slightly different numbers. But I came up with 44,000 vehicles. That would be battery electric vehicles in January, 42 in February, 55 in March, 58 in April, 55 in May, and 69 in June. So 69,000. So they clearly have had a major ramp up in the month of June. So what does that total to? That totals to 323,000 or thereabouts battery electric vehicles. How many did Tesla sell in the first half of 2022? That would be 564,000 battery electric vehicles. So clearly, even though people have all over the place that BYD is now the king of battery electric vehicles, that is not actually the case. They're a couple of 100,000 units shy of where Tesla is. Now, of course, you're welcome to count hybrid vehicles if you really, really want to, but I consider those a real kludge. They actually made a lot of sense back around 2010, 2011, in that sort of era when batteries were so expensive that just putting a couple of kilowatt hour battery pack into a vehicle made a lot more sense. You just couldn't afford to build one. Like, for example, the Nissan Leaf, which was kind of the first really popular mass market battery electric vehicle, it only had a range of 65 or 70 miles. So that was a significant problem for all of this stuff. So, in terms of creating the modern car that we think about that has a couple of 100 miles at least of range, that hasn't been around for a while. And so these hybrid vehicles made sense about 8 or 10 years ago. They don't make sense anymore. And what you're going to see is that's going to disappear. And actually, BYD has said they're getting rid of gas-based cars. Now, it's unclear if they're going to get rid of plug-in electric vehicles anytime soon. What they probably mean is fully gas-based cars. But anyway, you can see they're still selling quite a bit. It's approximately 50% of what they sell each month is plug-in electric. So it's, when they talk about 641,000 new electric vehicles, that's a really unfair comparison because you're not comparing apples to apples versus Tesla. One other really fascinating part is this part right here, March, April, May. You can see that their total car manufacture and total car deliveries were pretty aggressive in those months. This is exactly where Tesla got absolutely destroyed by the Shanghai shutdown. So it's an interesting fact that we've got BYD producing as many cars as they did during the months of April and May, when again, all of these lockdowns were going on, it makes you wonder whether they got a little bit of special treatment or whether they just happened to be manufacturing in cities that didn't have the zero COVID shutdowns, and so they were just a little bit lucky. But anyway, it's just it's interesting to look at those numbers and to see what was going on versus if you look at Tesla's numbers, there's a big dip in May from production because of Shanghai. So while the headlines are definitely overblown, this is still cause for celebration for BYD and for new electric vehicles overall, because it's a really, really good sign that they're selling this much. And of course, it's also a really good sign that BYD is going to phase out all of their ICE cars. Hopefully that means eventually they will phase out their plug-in ICE cars as well, but we will have to wait and see. So anyway, while the headlines might say one thing, it's very clear that in terms of battery electric vehicles, BYD has not caught up with Tesla by any means yet. They're a couple of 100,000 units short. Now, what does the mid to long term hold in the middle to later part of this decade? I really think that BYD is going to be a major competitor. I don't know whether they'll ever overtake Tesla in terms of units sold, but they seem to be the main competition to me. The big lesson here is not so much for Tesla, even though they're the ones in the headlines. The big news is to everybody else. Legacy auto manufacturers, everybody else who's making cars, they are in really, really big trouble. I've been saying this for a long time. Sandy Munro has been saying this for a long time, but the Chinese are coming, and there's going to be a tsunami of Chinese cars being exported out to the rest of the world. And it's going to be Tesla and a bunch of Chinese car companies, probably led by BYD, who are going to be leading the electric vehicle charge. And that is a really, really big deal. Everybody else really needs to take notice. And the fact that BYD is now the third largest market cap car company in the world should be telling people all they need to know about this. So everybody else who's making cars really needs to wake up. Speaking of Sandy Munro and batteries, let's look at the first step of their teardown of the Texas-made standard range Model Y with 4680 structural battery pack. It's really, really cool. You'll see that I've got some screen grabs from the YouTube video that they released just a few minutes ago as I'm recording this, and I'm going to restrict myself to just doing screen grabs because you should definitely watch the original video. I will, of course, put the link to that in the description, so once you get done with this video, please go watch that one. They deserve it, and it's really, really cool. And also subscribe to them as well as to me because they're almost at 300,000 subscribers. So that's really cool. So anyway, a really big thank you to Munro and Associates for, getting the car and tearing it down and sharing it with us. So here is, I think if you want one picture that kind of says it all, this screen grab right here says it all. This part down here, the silver part with the orange tubing going around it and what's underneath it is the actual battery pack, the structural battery pack. And sitting on top of that, directly mounted to this, right here, are the front seats of the vehicle. And so apparently Corey owes Sandy a steak dinner. That's what the bet was, because Corey said there was no way they were going to mount the seats directly onto the battery pack, but they actually did. And that's exactly what is going on here. So this is just amazing. One of the other things that really is blowing my mind is actually how skinny this looks. It's a little hard to tell, but from the angles that I can see, it doesn't look, I expected this battery pack to be substantially thicker because of how big the 4680 battery cells are. And again, scale might be kind of wonky because of the angles of the cameras and stuff, but it really looks very, very thin. So I'm almost thinking that we're talking about the batteries and then plates on top and the bottom, and there's nothing else really there. So, I mean, literally structural. They said that they're worried. They're going to obviously next take off this silver cover that's on top of it and try to peel it back. And they said they're worried about that because there's probably a lot of epoxy and other sort of structural elements that are going to make it really difficult for them to tear this off. But in terms of taking off the actual unit with the seats and everything, I think they said it was like 38 or 40 bolts. That was it. So you can see where these bolts are, like right here and right here and right here, etc. Right. So there's these bolts that they had it mounted into the upper part of the chassis, and then they just basically dropped it out. It's really amazing. Here is another shot of it. So again, you can see it's a little bit thicker from the front, but it's not very thick. The unit itself does not look to be that thick because I think a lot of it is the dolly that it's actually on. I think a big chunk of that space is the dolly. So I think it's not a particularly thick battery pack, which is very, very cool. But it's also really neat how you can see how the seats just are, you kind of construct this. If you think about construction, this makes it so much easier because it's so much easier to put seats onto just something that's sitting out in the open flat. And instead of having to sneak them inside the car and snake them in and put them in after everything's constructed. So in terms of construction, it feels a lot like kind of like a Lego. As Scott Walter, who talked about factory robots and stuff on this channel previously, and you can check out his video up here if you're interested, he said he responded to this video by saying, "Oh, I should have seen this myself." In other words, what he was saying was that these ideas are so brilliant and so simple, and in retrospect, so obvious, that it just completely makes sense from somebody who's been doing this for a long time. And I, as somebody who doesn't do this kind of stuff, it's also obvious that this makes complete sense. But it's one of those things that it takes somebody actually doing it before it seems like an obvious idea. So it's really, really brilliant work that's being done by Tesla. So here's a few more detail shots you can see. This is as they were lifting the car body off of the battery pack here. So you can see that's the whole rest of the car. So rear tires, front tires, Giga casting up here, Giga casting back here, you can't really see that. And then the aluminum, body that goes on the outside that you can see. But you can see how it's just basically one part, two parts, and then this whole battery pack part is the third part. And the rear seats will sit on top of this. I think they called this the penthouse. But anyway, it's kind of like, I think it's where the battery management system and a bunch of stuff for the battery goes. But the rear seats actually are right up here, and those actually lift out with the vehicle. But the front seats are attached to the battery itself. And here's a better shot. You can see these are the back seats as they're lifting it up. And then this is the front part of the car, and this is like the center console with the air conditioning and stuff that goes through, and a bunch of connectors and things. But while this might look a little complicated, they were saying that this was a really, really simple teardown because it was just connected by a few bolts and not a lot of other material or any kind of structural stuff that was difficult to detach, which of course also means that it's very easy to put together. And speaking of that, this is part of the Giga casting. I believe this is for the rear of the vehicle, but this is all that one die cast aluminum piece that's made by Idra. This is just part of it. It's very big. It's the whole back of the car. But these are a couple of the bolts that actually attach it to the structural battery plate. So again, you can see how very straightforward this is. You construct the part with the battery and the seats and everything, pop this thing on top, screw in a few bolts, and you're ready to roll. So you can make the car much more quickly. And then here you can see looking up at the vehicle. So this is like, they actually took it off and then they're videoing this straight up. But this is like the bottom of the screen, the steering wheel, obviously. And then of course the center console that gets attached and has the AC on it. And this part here was super, super cool. So this is a detail. You're in the back seat looking between the two front seats. So this is the driver's seat over here on the left. This is the passenger seat on the right. And this is the center console. And actually what happens is it's on rails. And so basically what they do is they put the whole thing together. They put it on top of the battery plate, and this part in here is actually the battery plate. That's not the part of the center console unit, and they slide the center console into it. So that would be the armrest thingy between the two seats, and then going into the spot where the phone chargers are and then the display screen. But they just slide that into place, and then they bolt in this side and they bolt in this side, and the thing's connected. They put a piece of plastic over the back of it to cover it up and make it look pretty, and they're done. So again, super, super fast to manufacture. And then we have Corey's hands here showing us a close-up, but you can see again, this is the actual battery pack itself, and this is just a riser. This folded aluminum is a riser that the seats are actually sitting on. So this is the bottom of the seat right here that's bolted in. But anyway, this is all one unit that the seats are actually attached to. And a little bit more of a close-up shot again. So batteries are down here, seats are up here. You're facing forward as if you're in kind of the back seat of the vehicle looking at it this way. But you can also, of course, see the wiring harnesses and things like that. But you'll also notice there's not a ton of wiring harnesses. It looks like they've again reduce the amount of cabling that they have to do for the entire vehicle. And then as they seat the top of the vehicle onto this, it actually just seats on this rubber gasket or some sort of urethane gasket or something. So it's, I think what happens is they lay this down, they put the top on the bottom, they screw in the bolts, and then it just sort of squeezes. And that is the weather protection part that protects the interior of the vehicle from rain or snow or anything like that. So it's very, very cool, very elegant, super, super simple. And finally, just to give a little bit of scale again here, you can see, these are human beings sitting there. So that I think that's Corey's feet right there. This would be the driver's side seat for an American-made car at least. But anyway, so you can see again how this all just sits right on this battery pack. It's very, very cool. Again, I highly recommend watching their video itself. They go into a lot more detail than I do here. And of course, they also know a heck of a lot more than I do. So it's very well worth watching it to really get a sense of it. And of course, they're going to break down the actual battery pack itself peel off the top and look at how the batteries are attached inside next. So that'll be super, super cool. All right, so BYD is growing really, really fast. They're still not a threat to Tesla, even though all of the headlines say that they are, but they are a really, really big threat to the rest of the world. So again, I believe it's going to be Tesla and Chinese car companies that are going to be dominating the battery electric vehicle space and therefore the automobile space in the very near future. And speaking of batteries, it's really cool to finally get a chance to take a look at the Texas-made Model Y and the way the structural battery pack is actually integrated into the chassis. Just amazing stuff that Tesla's doing. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much. This is really cool stuff. We've been having a conversation about all of this all day long today. So if you want to join the conversation, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.